Alas, the end of our journey in Bloomborrow. With friends we feasted, calamity beasts we fought. We hope you found our analysis thorough. With Duskmourn arriving, prepare to be distraught.
We got meds for your dreads. Comment below as we walk through the final recap of Bloomborrow Standard. Alrighty, gang. So Duskmourn is out, and we are all set to have a brewtastic episode. But before we do, let's take a look at the final tally for the tier list. Over the past 8 weeks, if you've been following along, we have looked at 51 major tournaments in Standard, tallying 408 top 8 spots, and how it converted into trophies, right? So from those results, Dimir Aggro came out on top as we look at how many top 8 spots it got and how many it converted. Dimir may have only garnered 30 top 8s, but it snagged a record-setting 7 trophies while doing so, making it the best bang-for-buck conversion of top 8ing to a trophy. We're all about getting people qualified here, not just moneyed. So, it may not have started strong, but Dimir took a sizable chunk of the midseason results and continued to have a presence till the end of it.
Second place went to Orzhov Midrange, snagging 46 top 8 spots and 6 trophies of its own. Orzhov had a wild ride this season, grabbing huge numbers at the beginning and the end, but was noticeably absent for most of the middle.
Third place was Rakdos Slickshot, making it the premier aggro archetype of Bloomborrow with 41 top 8s and 5 trophies max. Now, this archetype started slowly as well, in no small part due to Orzhov midrange, but as Orzhov fell off, the bird flew in and started evolving.
Golgari Talent snagged 4th place off of 43 top 8s and 5 trophies of its own, making a consistent showing throughout the season. The only real question for this deck was how much enchantment hate the rest of the format had for it, as the backdoor combo finally gave it a decent plan against ramp archetypes like Domain.
And our final tier 1 deck was Domain, grabbing 50 top 8s and 4 trophies, though it had a roller coaster season, with some weeks featuring double-digit top 8s and other featuring almost none. So Slickshot and Dimir definitely kept this archetype in check for a good portion of the past 8 weeks, but it did its part in wrecking all those control mid-range archetypes where it got those favorable matchups it was looking for.
Meanwhile, down in Tier 2, we start with the Convoke twins, Jeskai and Boros. Taken together, they snagged 33 top 8s and 6 trophies total, with a nearly even split between the two. Each got 3 trophies and 16 to 17 top 8s. Thus, we address them as one entity, as the differences between them were minor, and the overarching strategy remained the same. The only question for this deck was whether you wanted counter spells or more grind. Either way, the sweepers still hit it the same.
Mono Red Aggro surprised us all by quietly amassing 13 top 8s and 2 trophies, proving that Slickshot plus Forge plan can come in many flavors, and they don't all need to splash another color. Honestly, this archetype I think did the best job of illuminating the 12 mouse 4 bird package and how incredibly effective it is.
Azorius Control managed 16 top 8s and 2 trophies, despite rotation claiming multiple staples from that archetype. Where Mono Red helped us identify the core of Mice Slickshot, Azorius Control helped us identify how strong Caretaker's talent as an engine is.
Rakdos Lizards rounds out our Tier 2 list with 29 top 8s, but only a single trophy. While this deck made a splash when Pro Tour Hall of Famer came out swinging with it, the splash hate from all the other aggro archetypes proved to be its undoing, as it consistently top 8ed, only to get hit with enough temporary lockdowns to push it right back in the dirt. It came close, but lacked the power it needed to consistently get people qualified.
And in Tier 3, we kick off with Azorius Cookies, which managed 2 trophies and 8 top 8s, a 25% conversion, though it was featured prominently in local metagames. At the start of the season, we all frankly thought this would be Simic Cookies, but the archetype evolved and transitioned into Azorius instead.
Mono White Control snagged 2 trophies in 9 top 8s, highlighting yet another Caretaker's engine, though this one acknowledged that you're giving up major points to any mill-based win con from the opponent in exchange for absolutely ranching your fellow mid-range players and having a strong plan for aggro decks. Let's all remember that this evolved out of Boros Control, which was an early hit in the season before fading into obscurity once everyone realized you didn't need Urabrask's Forge when Imidane's Recruiter was an easier splash and better solution with all the artifact and enchantment hate flying around.
At the tail end of the season, Rakdos Slipshot was born, featuring Calisel Sword's fling ability. It grabbed 8 top 8s and a single trophy, though notably that trophy happened over this past weekend. Expect this deck to make the leap with Duskmourn, as it only improves with a few more cards now in play.
And last but not least, Sultai Reanimator, aka Sultai Emergence, snuck in at the end of the season with 10 top 8s and a trophy, giving us our second proper combo deck in Standard this season.
Now, since we have no Duskmourn tournaments to analyze yet, this episode we have a brewtastic slate of decks for you. Get ready for all the spice, beginning with Azorius Mentor.
Alrighty, gang. So I was looking around at this deck and thinking abhorrent Oculus, right? Isn't that what everybody thinks when they look at this deck and they look at Duskmourn and they're like, okay, so you can exile 6 cards from your graveyard, or you can just cheat it into play with a helping hand on turn 2, which I have done and feels amazing. So this card gives the deck a lot of legs. It grinds really hard. The Manifest Dread happening each opponent's upkeep means that now you have this inevitability plus a 5/5 body just doming them every turn. It's strong. It's really strong. They need to have answers to this immediately, much like your other threats. And it feels a lot more balanced as an archetype now that we have 12 threats to present, each of which have different pluses and minuses. Because Oculus is impossible to get into play if they have Rest in Peace, but once it's in play, you don't care if they resolve the Rest in Peace, unlike Haughty Djinn, which relies on you keeping that grave intact the whole time. Now, also of note, we like the fact that Exercise exists, but we haven't really placed it in the deck yet. I think it's going to have some room to grow, room to maneuver, but right now it's all on Get Lost.
I see. So, how big of an issue is graveyard hate for this specific archetype?
Honestly, it depends on how early it comes down, and it depends what type, right? Because this deck provides enough fodder for the graveyard that like a Lord Skidder is typically too slow and not enough hate to actually keep it in check. But if you have Rest in Peace on turn 2, it can be a huge problem, right? And Soul Guide Lantern, the Ghost Vacuum that just got printed, these are all cards that need to be considered, but ultimately Rest in Peace is the biggest threat for this deck. It's like temporary lockdown was for Convoke. That's what it is for this, except it hits turn 2, and it just sticks around if you don't deal with it. So it's a problem. It's a problem, but you do have hands that get around it. You know, you have hands where you just go Monastery Mentor, we don't care, play a million sleight of hands, get a big army swing. So it's not a given, but it shuts off 2/3 of what you're trying to do, which is a big deal.
All right. Let's move on to the next list that we have for you today. Golgari Rampinator. Credit to Denrial for this list. Thank you, Rebellion, for all your submissions throughout this Bloomborrow cycle and into Duskmourn. We've been brewing and getting going in the Rebellion Discord. Link down below if you want to join us. Credit to Denrial. We have several self-mill strategies contained within this archetype. We have Cache Grab. We have the Overlord of Belmurk. And then in conjunction with that self-mill, we have Aftermath Analyst. You can ramp back in using all those lands that you turn over. I love the strategy. I love the concept of Lumra as a top end, big ramp payoff. You get a giant bear, right? That feels awesome. And then of course we have the Green Overlord as well, providing another reason to go big. Atraxa becomes an easy cast right here with that Overlord, or you can reanimate it with Valgavoth's Faithful, one of my new favorite pieces. Since I personally love Reanimator lists, and this is at the top of my list to slide into several different Reanimator archetypes. I want to point to the sideboard. We have a new card, Nowhere to Run. This acts as a bit of removal, similar to a card like Disfigure, but it's also an enchantment that stops hexproof and ward on creatures. So very interesting, especially since we're seeing a lot of that hexproof and ward with some of the new creatures in Duskmourn.
Fair. Now, Max, I look at a deck like this and I think, what's the appeal of this versus playing like regular Domain? Why is this stronger?
I think it's really simple. It really comes down to an easier mana base. The 2 colors for most of these cards, it's a lot easier to manage than trying to play out Domain. Also, you tend to be doing a lot more in the earlier turns, whereas with Domain, you're kind of sitting around, tempoing, and waiting to do something on turns 5 through 7. And sometimes that's just too slow, especially when we're still seeing a really go fast aggro sort of meta. So I think it has that slight advantage there. It has a bit more of an appeal there for players who'd rather go just a bit faster.
Fair. And it's a fast format, you know? Slick shots around, Heartfire Heroes rolling. There's a turn 2 kill in Standard. You got to get up and move, right? So, with that in mind, let's take a look at a full-on Reanimator list. Little Orzhov. Alrighty, so this is one that I've been messing around with. I have no idea if it's actually going to be good enough, but it's a lot of fun in theory. So you're playing Reanimator on the back of Rite of the Moth. You're playing Valgavoth's Faithful. You've got a number of ways to get there. You have early ways to put Harvester of Misery into your graveyard by trying to, of course, kill those Heartfire heroes, those Slickshots, etc. You also have lilies to help you get some of the bigger stuff into grave. Now, the idea here is not necessarily that you're trying to reanimate an 8-mana spell. It's more so that these all come in on turn 3, these Steel Seraphs, these Friction Flesh Gorgers, or you can discard Harvester on turn 2, and then you play them back, and they are just big derpies. You know, like they just get going so hard. And if they kill it on the front end, then you just bring it back on the back end, and now they're screwed. The number of games where I've gone turn 1 Faithful, you know, turn 2 doesn't matter, turn 3 Flesh Gorger, they kill it, turn 4 get Flesh Gorger back as a 7/5 with Faithful. It's pretty damning for them. It's a really good list against aggro, I can say that much.
That's fair. And I got to test this out last night on my release day stream against Figured Bases and against the next deck we're going to talk about, Azorius Enchantress. And I found like this deck is really cool. The Flesh Gorgers in particular are very deadly. But does a lack of card advantage really keep this deck out?
Possibly. It doesn't have a lot of ways to deal with that. It's not set up for that. I mean, you have hostile investigators in the sideboard. Those come in for like the Harvester of Miseries against the grindier matchups, and they can provide a certain amount of card advantage, especially in conjunction with Lily. But even then, it's not as consistent as you need it to be. So I'm concerned caretaker talent decks are just going to run right through this, and I haven't played against them yet because like the ladder's been so aggro. I mean, that's what happens when some new set gets released. Everybody's got to try the new hotness, and aggro is where it's at. But when it calms down and mid range comes back, I'm a little concerned. Yeah.
Fair. Yeah, I am a little bit as well, but I did have fun with this archetype. I can report and attest to that at least. But speaking of that matchup yesterday, the deck I faced off against, Azorius Enchantress. Credit to Figured Base for bringing this archetype to our attention. I want to say right off the rip, the big advantage of this deck is that it's low curve, very low curve. Low curve creatures, including the full set of Silent Hall Creepers, which is slowly becoming one of my more favorite cards from Duskmourn. We've got Veteran Survivor and Optimistic Scavenger in here as well. Both of those taking advantage of the survival mechanic. Reluctant Role Model, throw that in that list as well. All of these will grow as the match wears on. You've also got several protective spells, several ways to protect your creatures, give them hexproof or ward, Shard Mage's Rescue. Feyflight in particular is really nice because it gives flying, and then Sheltered by Ghosts as well. And then as far as defensive spells, we've got the full set of No More Lies, putting in a lot of work, especially because it's exile based. It doesn't allow your opponent to reanimate the creature spell. We've got 3 Elspeth's Smite and 4 Exercise as well that are in the sideboard that are exile based. And I just want to iterate that exile based removal, stock value is going up right now, especially because of all the graveyard shenanigans.
Yeah, when Heartfire's death trigger hits you for 5+ damage, you start looking at exile pretty seriously. So
Yeah.
that makes a lot of sense. Let's move right along to the Heartfire deck and talk a little bit about Rakdos Slipshot with all the updates. Alrighty, so for those of you who are unaware, this wins on turn 2 sometimes. It's not common, but it can happen. Yes, I've done it. How that works, turn 0, Leyline comes into play. Turn 1, Mountain into Heartfire Hero. Turn 2, you get a turn inside out onto Heartfire Hero. That's going to make it an 8/2 after the Leyline trigger lets you redirect, and after the Valiant trigger hits. You then smack with Heartfire Hero for 8. Then you're going to go ahead and fling it for 1 more mana. That'll be the second mountain you play into this. And the fling will deal 8, and then the death trigger will deal 8 for a total of 24 points of damage. And that can happen on turn 2. So when you're looking at standard, be aware that this deck exists. It is good. It is not easy to stop. Even if you stop the first rush, it's got a lot of haste coming in. And for the people that are starting to mess with the sideboard, Screaming Nemesis is legit. This is yet another card that they need to exile or it starts wrecking their face. And you can't block it, like you cannot block it with a Deep Cavern Bat. You know what I mean? There is no chumping this card because they will just redirect the damage to your face and then you can't gain life ever again, which is all they need for a Forge to beat you.
Good lord, all that needs to happen is this needs to happen enough in a competitive setting, and that leads me to my question: do you think Wizards is eventually going to ban a card like Heartfire Hero, considering how many different archetypes and decks we're seeing it in now?
I think it's going to depend somewhat on where we see the next big tournament. You know what I mean? Like if there's a Pro Tour or an RC coming up that highlights just a top 8 filled with Heartfire Hero decks, yeah, I think we're going to see a ban. They're pretty good about that. If it feels like it's overwhelming the format and your quality of life is going down by playing it, then yeah, they're going to get around to it. I don't think it's a quick ban because there's nothing inherently broken about it. You can still win with a cut down against that, like play. That's all it takes is one piece removal. The problem and the reason I can see it getting banned is that you have to have the removal turn 1 if you're on the draw. So like there can be no tapped land on turn 1 and you have to have the 1 mana removal piece, which means you're going to have to run like 8 1 mana removal spells to reliably see one on turn 1. And that's where you start getting to that like quality of life ban where okay, like we can all do that, but now we're playing like that Oko format where we're playing 4 Mystical Dispute and 4 Noxious Grasp in the main because you have to answer Oko, and that was what led to the ban of Oko. So I could see that exact
Yeah.
logic getting applied where they're like, okay, like yeah, it only takes a removal spell, but you have to have it turn 1, which means everybody has to run 8 of this spell just to keep it in check, and now the meta's warped around it. So it's going to depend on how well it performs at tournaments. They're not going to do it just out of theory. They're going to wait to see some tournament results, but if it starts taking down tournaments left and right, yeah, it's gonna hit the chopping block. I'm willing to predict that.
We'll have to see in coming weeks how consistent this is and what the context is if it does get banned. But the fact that it's a part of so many really fast strategies, I think, is the real reason here, like you pointed out. But let's talk about another Rakdos list. This one, Rakdos Reanimator. So credit to Athena the Bun, although really a lot of members in the Discord have been working their way towards building this list, some version of it. But Athena the Bun gave us this one here. I just want to point out it's a Cruel Claw based list. We've been trying to make this card work since the card came out. I think this list right here might be viable. I think we got some very necessary pieces. I want to point to first Fear of Missing Out. This card right here, just being able to give you that second combat phase. Can you imagine the situation? FOMO plus Cruel Claw hitting on 2 combat phases. I mean, that's some jank right there. That really is. And then the Overlords, something that shocked me about the Overlords, for some reason when I first got them spoiled for me, I thought they were legendary, but they're not legendary creatures. So they do work with a card like Coiling Rebirth, where you're going to get double that effect. So that in itself is a wild play, especially with the red one doing the 4 damage. So I mean that can be a win con in specific situations. We've got 2 copies of Ghost Vacuum in the sideboard, easily able to snatch ETBs from the opponent and take advantage of the fact that Reanimator strategies are back.
So I look at this, and we looked at the Orzhov Reanimator list earlier and how I wanted to be dumping Harvester of Misery as a 4 into that because it is a early answer to things like Heartfire Hero comes back as a sweeper and plays into that whole let's cheat it into play if we can. Is that something you think would have a place in this potentially? I'm not saying for sure. I'm saying potentially.
I'm going to say yes here. And I think 2 reasons. One, we're still seeing super low curve aggro. We just talked about the Heartfire Hero decks. But also because I can see a scenario where Coiling Rebirth brings back a couple of these and you get a -4/-4 board wipe situation going on. I think that's useful too. I think 4 toughness is becoming pretty popular, and Heartfire Hero might get up to 4 toughness in some situations. So
And with that, we're on to Mono Black. So credit to Vixen Zavir. This is a Reanimator list with a lot of grind to it. I know that they're working on this a lot. Like this is going to be their baby. This is what they're going to work on all season long in all likelihood. So let's talk about some of the fun things you get to do. First and foremost, Lively Dirge is kind of like Entomb, but for standard at this point. The ability to get this Valgavoth and sit it right in your graveyard so that you can use Valgavoth's Faithful to bring it back, which A, feels like very much on lore, but B, I've heard this card's amazing. Like I've heard that Pioneer has started messing with this with Transmogrify as a target instead of Atraxa. So interesting to see that this is making its presence known already. Outside of that, I mean, this is just grindy. And you have cards like Servant of the Stinger that they're going to have to block, or else you can, again, grab key pieces that you need, such as Valgavoth, Valgavoth's Faithful, whichever piece you need to start pushing it together. And much like the Orzhov list, you've got those early Friction Flesh Gorgers that you play on 3, they kill, and then you use Faithful to bring it right back into play as a 7/5. So I think we're going to see a lot more like cheat season to play with those prototype cards, and I love it.
I love this list. I also got to test this yesterday, and I had just a bit more fun that I did with the Orzhov Reanimator list. It's grindy as hell, and I love it. Valgavoth already putting in work. But my question for you, do we need the playset of Leyline of the Void? Are reanimation strategies really that popular right now?
I think they have a shot. I mean, if we're going to see Azorius Mentor, we're going to see various Reanimator strategies, including the Squirming Emergence deck, start to make more gains. Yeah, we're getting to a place where it's kind of like Phoenix in Pioneer, where you got to have Leyline on turn 0 to stop the madness. And especially if you're playing your own reanimation strategy, it's got to be Leyline because you need it to hit only them. So yeah, I could absolutely see a playset of Leyline moving forward. I do think reanimation is going to be popular week 1 because, I mean, who doesn't love it? You know what I mean? Like there's something
Yeah.
about it that just right in the feels when you get to put out a big dirtle on turn 4.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. All right, let's move on to the next list we have for you. 5-color doors. I want to point out first, this is the perfect deck for Ill-Timed Explosion because I had to research this, but doors apparently have mana value that is equal to both sides when they are present in your library, graveyard, or in exile. So for the purpose of something like Ill-Timed Explosion, it does a ton of damage. It only has the mana value of the side you're casting when it's on the stack. So that's the only exception there. Just want to point that out. We've got 4 copies of Marina Vendrell. Initially, I thought this was a commander card, but this deck actually makes this card work. It's going to retrieve you a lot of goodies, a lot of doors, and your ley lines. So don't nothing to sneeze at. Very useful if you can get her out there. I just want to point out some of these doors. We've got 1 restricted office, 2 copies of restricted office plus lecture hall. On the front side, it acts as a board wipe, tempoing your opponent, and then giving everything else on your board hexproof on the flip side. And these are easy to cast, easy to pay for when you're playing with the Cornucopia. So I just want to point that out there. We've also got Promising Stairs on the flip side of Central Elevator. This can act as a win con. So this is going to be one of your win conditions.
So Max, in past episodes, we've discussed the 5-color like Niv Mizzet decks. Is Marina Vendrell stronger than those Niv Mizzet 5-color Cornucopia builds, in your opinion?
I think only when it's placed in this room-based shell. This is the only card that's going to make this room-based shell work in a 5-color setting. Niv requires some very specific dual-color cards to be in the deck, whereas this has a wider variety of effects coming in. It's a little bit more toolboxy built into the room. So for me, this tempo is a little bit better than that deck does, and the payoffs are just a little bit better. So I like this one just marginally better than Niv Mizzet.
Fair. And that's going to bring us to our final segment, Ahead of the Curve. Now, this is our weekly segment to synthesize all of our analysis into 2 viable options for you to take to your next tournament. Max, we have looked at 14 archetypes in our recap and 8 brews tonight. What are you playing going into weekend 1 of Duskmourn Standard?
All right, so I'm going to be playing Dimir Aggro. A lot of you have already seen this shell from me with Invasion of Amonkhet, but I really think here, because of Duskmourn, Invasion of Amonkhet is going to get a chance to shine. It's going to take advantage of the Reanimator self-mill strategies that your opponents are going to be playing. You get severe card advantage through the combination of Hall Creeper with Gix. I boosted Gix up to 3 copies. I think it fits in really well here. We've got a formidable removal suite, also with Spell Stutter for support as a counter spell, and we still have those the Fairy Dream Thieves in there to supplement that. We've also got in the sideboard a new card, Withering Torment, 3 copies of. I think black enchantment removal with creature removal built in is beautiful, and it's definitely what the doctor ordered for that color. And so Dimir Aggro is going to take advantage of it here. What are some things you want to pull from your graveyard with the Invasion of Amonkhet? Of course, we've got the new card at the top end, Valgavoth, going to put in some work, and I love the ward on this card. It's oh man, it's backbreaking. So that's what I'm going to be playing going into this week.
Yeah, I could see a return of Shieldred's Edict if Valgavoth makes a heavy showing, because that ward is no joke. So, alrighty, and on my end, a little Orzhov Control. So, what are the additions? Where did we move things? I can tell you I'm already 3-0 with this in the Mythic Ladder top 1,000. I can also tell you that Nowhere to Run feels really good with all those Gruul Slickshot players running Snakeskin Veil and me not caring at all. Feels great. Also, fantastic at dealing with Heartfire Hero because -3/-3 means that death trigger, not very potent. Other big card that we got Toby. I don't think people understand how much better this is than Sanguine Evangelist for Caretaker's talent, so let me just say this is so much better. This is so much better. It's not even close. Just imagine it this way. If you get Toby out, right, they're going to think, okay, we remove the 1/1, now the 4/4 can't do anything. Except you have this thing called Caretakers that'll just copy the 4/4, and now you have 8 power on the board on turn 4.
Yeah.
And then it turns into 12 power because you get to level 3, right? Like, it's kind of insane how fast this ramps up with Toby. Also, you get to flicker Toby with Eternal Wanderer. So if they kill the other side of it, just flicker it. It's not a big deal. We've got a lot more like enchantment hate with exercise going into the sideboard, and we've got grave hate with the ghost vacuum and the extra rest in peace because I expect all of the reanimation coming in. But ultimately, it's mostly the same shell. We're just making minor upgrades. We're tweaking because I expect to see Reanimator. I expect to see Slickshot, and so far I haven't been wrong. It's been all over the place.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. Take advantage of the fact that Reanimator is all over the place. Okay, well, that's the last week of Bloomborrow in the books. Thank you all for supporting us. Special shout out to our members who support the Rebellion by watching these videos all the way through. We thank you. And we'll be back next week with more analysis.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment on this video. Every click helps. We appreciate the hell out of it, everybody. And until next time, Rebels, untap, upkeep, resist.